Chris Cordani, Dr. Jerome Corsi's producer, once again here. Welcome to the Truth Central. Dr. Corsi continues to move forward with his extensive research and Andrew Paquette's extensive research into suspicious voter roll algorithms with election interference potential in several U.S. states. On this edition of the show, we're going to be playing a recent conversation he had with Lady Hamilton to dive deeply into how these codes can be used, while also talking about the American left's and World Economic Forum's true agenda overall. This as part of the Real Steel series on the Truth Central. You can find out more about this effort and how to donate to help Dr. Corsi, Andrew Paquette, Dr. Graves, and the team expose the threat and stop this real steel through the website gods5stones.com. That's gods5stones.com. If you're watching on the video, you can always easily use that QC code next to me. Now, here is Dr. Corsi's discussion with Lady Hamilton.
Dr. Jerome Corsi.
It's great to be with you. Thank you very much. That was a nice introduction.
Thank you. It's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for coming and educating us of what's going on in a lot of our voter systems, especially with the manipulation. And I am eager to learn what you have to say.
Well, this is, if you go to our website, which is Gods 5 Stones, that's G-O-D-S, no apostrophe, G-O-D-S, and 5, you spell out the number 5, F-I-V-E, and stones is plural, S-T-O-N-E-S, gods5stones.com. That's our website at 501c3. And we've got a lot of information on how these algorithms have been developed, and they do permit voter fraud. They're in the State Board of Election official voter registration databases, and they're really secret. I mean, this is like a intelligence operation. I mean, I think the Board of Elections in many states don't even know these algorithms are there. Yeah. And it's what they do is they permit you to create. It's like a card numbering scheme where you can basically create false votes. And what you do is you can at will call them up from the database. You hide them into the database again. And what you do is you can find them as you need them. So only the criminals know where they are. Right. Like when you mark cards, you want to get them into the deck. Nobody knows where they're, and then you can call upon the marked cards when you want to play them. Right. And so therefore, when it comes time to take these renumbered cards, these hidden cards that are your fake voters, you can say in New York State, there's like 300,000 of them. And you can say, well, Kamala Harris is losing a little bit. We better vote some of our fake votes. And you pull them out of the stack, make sure they get a mail-in ballot requested. Then you vote, then you get that mail-in vote with the same number, because even though the voter's fraudulent, they get a state ID number. The ID numbers match, and so you've got a certifiable vote, even though that voter doesn't exist. And these are like intelligence agency operations to embed this data inside the election actual databases of voter registration that they're using to run the election. We found them in New York, New Jersey, found them in Ohio, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. We're about to report on Texas and Arizona. They're in Hawaii. I mean, about every state we're looking at, we're finding these hidden codes, and they do not belong there. They're not for any good reason. And I think it's part of the intelligence operation to run our elections. The CIA has been running elections overseas for decades. I think they may have just decided. And these algorithms have been in some of the state databases since 2007. Right. And so therefore, you have to wonder how many people are in the U.S. Congress or the Senate are there because the algorithms put them there, rather than because they were voted by the public. So I think this is a national security hazard, and it jeopardizes our system of voting. And we've done a lot to expose this around the country to make it more difficult to cheat this way. And I think it's, again, my reasons for thinking it's an intelligence operation is they also seem to run a psychological operation wherever these algorithms are used. So you see, they say, well, Joe Biden's not doing so well after the debate with Donald Trump. His
Right.
poll numbers were so low, nobody would believe that he was surging. And the way these algorithms are used, they pick Kamala Harris, and suddenly the intelligence agencies feed the mainstream media with a narrative that
Mhm.
Kamala Harris has just Kamala Harris has just become a genius, and now her poll numbers are matching Donald Trump's, and she's catching on, which is all a narrative planted by the intelligence agencies and the media, so that when they do steal the election for her, it looks plausible.
That's right.
Okay, and so what we're trying to do is expose this in advance and get the various states to be very vigilant with the mail-in voting. And I think we've done a lot to get the word out about this, so that, you know, we're talking to the state secretaries of state, we're talking to various state officials, we've had conversations with state legislatures,
Mhm.
and I think as this advances, it's going to be much more difficult for whomever is running this criminal scheme to steal an election when everybody's made aware that
Right.
that's the goal. Because I think everybody's going to be watching for it this time,
Right.
and it'll be much harder to get away with it. You know, you can cheat a little bit, but if you have to cheat massively, if Donald, you know, one of the solutions to this is have a huge vote for Donald Trump, overwhelming, too big to rig, they're saying,
Right.
where, you know, you have so many people voting for Donald Trump that they can't possibly steal the election with fraudulent mail-in ballots without it being apparent.
Right. Right. You know, I was shared a clip, I guess it's probably a month or so ago, but it was talking about that too with, you know, we have been manipulating elections all over the world. Why would we not think that we manipulate our own election? And it was exactly talking about that with Kamala Harris, you know, going that you have to make it look plausible so that it's got to come close or it's got to go whatever, but they have to have those numbers so that the people can think, oh yeah, okay, you know, it was real close, but she won, you know, right? Or and make her look like the superstar that she is and things like that. And you know, I agree with you on this, and I'm glad that you're bringing awareness to this as well. This is awesome.
Well, and we're also making progress because I think there's a lot of people that want to preserve election integrity. We don't want to see our
Right.
elections destroyed. So there's a
Right.
court decision, the U.S. District Court, a federal court in Arizona, the District of Arizona, a decision made by Judge Michael Liberty, who was from the Arizona legislature, now is a U.S. District Judge. And the case is American Encore, ENCORE, versus Adrian Fontes, FONTES. Now, Fontes was the Arizona Secretary of State, and the case involves a 2022 midterm election in Arizona when Cochise County, one of the counties in Arizona, the Board of Supervisors decided that the election was fraudulent and they wanted to do a hand count of the ballots rather than just rely upon the computer count, which they thought had been switching votes. Well, Fontes forbid them from doing that. And so therefore they did not certify the election in Cochise County in 2022. Now, Fontes had written a manual the year before, procedures manual, that said that if a county did not certify the election by a deadline, he had the right to survey and canvass the other counties and certify the state election without that county.
Wow.
So that's what Fontes did. He certified the election without Cochise County and said it was a legal election. Now, the federal district court came in and said that was unconstitutional because Fontes had disenfranchised, violated the 14th Amendment voting rights of the citizens of Cochise County by excluding them from the election.
Wow.
Now, what this does is it means that any supervisor anywhere in the country, in one county, can blow the whistle and can stop the certification of the 2024 election. And say, we're not going to certify it. And they can't be then overridden or overruled. Now, in Georgia, they're already trying to do this. In Georgia, a state superior court judge, which is not nearly at the distinction of a federal district court, ruled that the supervisors have to certify the election. They must, or they face civil or criminal penalties. Now, what's the job of a supervisor if you're not allowed to say an election shouldn't be certified because it was fraud?
Right.
This decision, I think, empowers us to have much more aggressive watching of the election while it's going on. And the key, so many of these court cases have failed because we've challenged a certified election in 2024, and the courts have a very high bar to allow you to challenge a certified election. Because that election has already been voted and approved by the appropriate legal procedures to have been done correctly. So now suddenly you're undermining elections, and you can get charged with civil and criminal penalties, even for raising these issues. We've had 80 or 90 lawsuits that have gone nowhere since 2020.
Wow.
But again, I think the problem is challenging a certified election. And what we're trying to do with God's 5 stones is to alert people to not wait for the certification, to jump in immediately and challenge the election from what you see and demand an investigation. Now, if you investigate these mail-in ballots, you're going to find that you've got to take the signature on the outer envelope and go back to the signature on the registration card and match it. Many of the signatures don't match. Even the names signed on some of these mail-in ballots are not the voter. It's someone else. You can tell that multiple ballots were signed by the same person. You can do canvassing. You can send people out in the community with a sample of the mail-in ballots and show that these are people who don't exist. They're not qualified to vote. Okay, so the goal here is to have a aware public of how the steal is done, and then to prevent it. And then we've got to come back and we've got to fundamentally rethink our election systems, because if someone can put an algorithm, a secret intelligence agency grade algorithm into a database at the state board of election, we've got problems. And these cannot be allowed to remain there. There's other issues. I think a candidate who loses an election could have a challenge before certification saying the reason I lost was because the algorithms voted against me. And so, if you're in a casino and you're playing 21 and you find out the casino was playing with a marked deck of cards, that casino can't prove you lost any hand. You should get your money back.
That's right.
Well, if the candidate lost an election and complains to the supervisors that the reason they lost was the algorithm, has a legitimate complaint, just that the algorithm exists. So, in 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 states where we found algorithms, losers to elections could challenge them immediately. And these algorithms can be used in the down election races for U.S. House, Senate, state legislature, judges, city officials, mayor.
Board of Supervisors was as I'm thinking. Those are elected officials, everyone, in your counties. But yeah, go ahead, sir.
Well, that's the whole point, is that we need to take control of this system.
That's right.
And we need to get it out of the hands of the criminals, out of the hands of the Democrats who don't seem to care about whether it's legal or not. The Democrats seem to have abandoned traditional concepts of law and justice. We've got a Department of Justice that thinks that the biggest threat in domestic terrorism is Catholics who like the Latin Mass.
And already threatening that anybody who is even going to oppose the election could be faced with criminal charges. You're like, what? I mean, that's the whole point of being in the Republican that we're in, is the ability to check and balance this kind of thing, to be able to check and verify. I'm just even alarmed that Arizona was certified and just said, oh, we don't need that county. You guys don't matter. We're just going to skip you and just move on. I'm like, unbelievable. This is why our counties are so important, everyone. When you want to talk about what you can do, our counties, our towns, our areas are so important, because what's to say that your county's not just going to get skipped over in your state? That's alarming.
It is alarming. And it's alarming to think that the Democrats would think this way, that they
Right.
would want to win this way, that
Right.
they would, they don't care if they cheat or lie or steal or have a double standard of justice for one for themselves, in which anything they do is okay, and the
Right.
other standard of justice is political. They just
Right.
want power.
Right.
Well, that's not how we're set up in this country. That's moving us into a totalitarian system.
That's right.
We don't want this. Neo-Marxism is, it erases traditional morals and it erases traditional standards of right and wrong. And if we again the Democratic Party, which is already a neo-Marxist party, wants to become a treasonous party and destroy elections, well, there ought to be consequences of that.
That's right.
And there ought to be consequences on election officials who do nothing to get rid of the algorithms, even when we tell them about them. They don't want to admit they're there. Well, these algorithms, if you look at gods5stones.com and spend any time at all reading the material we have there, the papers, the Andrew Paquette is the computer genius who found the algorithms. I mean, it's like decoding a military code. I mean, it's almost a miracle that he did find it.
Wow.
And now that he's found it, he's able to find others in other states. And so therefore we've got a clear movement here and increasing public awareness to the fact that we are not going to let it just go by, that we are operating with corrupt public systems and officials who will lie, cheat, and steal in order to maintain power.
Right.
It
is so alarming. Even your judges, a lot of your judges are even elected, because I was thinking about this when you were on these lawsuits and they're going nowhere, or you go to these representatives who don't even want to pull their heads out of the sand because they don't want you to know that this is actually your right to investigate this stuff. But this is why, again, it's so important to look at people and what their actions are and look into your own communities and find out what judges you have that are electable and get them the heck out of there if they're not doing what is constitutionally right. I mean, even the left, when Donald Trump won, I can't remember. I mean, there were so many people that are like, oh my gosh, the election was stolen. But heaven forbid it's challenged on the other side,
Right,
and then, oh no, right, we want to throw you in jail for saying that.
It's a double standard.
Yes, it is.
And when the left says that Donald Trump will destroy democracy, well, you had Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi come in and tell Joe Biden that he wasn't going to be the candidate.
Right.
And they told, Kamala Harris she was going to be the candidate. She had never won a primary. She had never done. In 2020, she did terrible running for president. These two candidates, Kamala Harris and this Walz, are the two worst candidates I've ever seen in my life.
Right.
Kamala Harris, if you watch the Brett Baer interview on Fox,
yes, I did.
Was a disgrace.
Right.
She was. And, she couldn't answer a question, wouldn't answer a question.
Right. And then she lost her temper at the end, like a child. Right.
She's got this bizarre laughter, this cackling, which she does, which I don't understand. It's like, she's possessed somehow with these demons inside her that take everything that she's saying as a lie and just laugh at everybody for listening to her.
Right.
She's got constantly, she'll say anything, and then she does this bizarre laughing.
Right.
And so, again, I don't see that she has policy knowledge or experience at this level of government. And yet they want to say, well, her polls are equal to Donald Trump's polls. I don't think so.
Right. And, unless people are just listening to the machines, and listening to the social media, just the 5 seconds and, oh, okay, great. Or you're not even paying attention to the real thing. You're not watching these interviews. You're not thinking for yourself kind of thing. It's the only thing I can even imagine. Because, even Donald Trump said when he was in the debate with her, one of the greatest thing he ever said was, you've been in office for 3.5 years. And so exactly how are you going to make it better? And when you actually admit that, you were part of this whole policies, you're part of these whole programs going forward, and you've been there for 3.5 years and we're in this mess to begin with. And, how are you going to be any different? If you're going to make a change, why aren't you doing it now?
God, she says, we're going to turn the page. Well, why didn't you turn the page 3 years ago? Right. This is ridiculous. It's not credible. And it's, and again, the whole nature of what the Democrats are running on, they have no platform. We have, expanding war in the Middle East. We've got a war in Ukraine. We're on the verge of nuclear war for the first time, maybe since the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 1960s. And we have a out of control federal budget. The dollar has been weakened. The middle class has been devastated by inflation. Then people are living on their credit cards, and the country is not in a better off situation than it was 4 years ago.
No.
And we've got immigrants coming in here. They're dumping now thousands of immigrants into these small towns where they don't belong. The cultures don't match, and the illegal immigrants are getting better benefits than we can provide to the hurricane survivors in North Carolina.
Amen to that. That is so true. That is absolutely alarming to me when you see these reports of the thousands they get in benefits, and the medical, the education, the food stamps, the whatever, and you're like, and we have vets that are homeless and victims in terrible, terrible situations, right, from natural disasters or whatever you want to call it, and yet we can't give them even, and the 750 is not even a grant, not even money, which is 750 is alarming, but it's a loan that you have to apply for. I mean, it's like, are you kidding me? We send billions overseas, but we can't take care of our own people.
We sent another 150 billion to Ukraine, and we couldn't take care of the hurricane victims in North Carolina. I mean, eventually Americans get sick and tired of this.
Yes, they do.
And just say, we've had enough of the lying. We've had enough of the Satanism, taking our children and mutilating them sexually in the schools, before they reach the age of puberty.
I am so against that, Dr. Corsi. I've had so many shows on that. And I'm like, one of the great things about our country is when you're 18, you get the right. You may not like your speech. You may not like that choice, but you have the right to go do that. But to manipulate our young, I have a nationwide online school, starting high school, going down. But I saw this start with my second grader who was 5. And the reason that she was in our school, because mom said no to all this crap. But it's alarming that you're going to introduce children that can't even think, can't make decisions for themselves. And you're going to tell them, number one, you're born in the wrong body. And hey, we've got pills and surgeries for you that you are going to be messed up, if not, have ramifications from. I mean, and they're all for this, or let's just murder all the babies, right? Hey, bring on abortion. And that's your platform. That's what you want to run on. And I can't even imagine people that want to vote for this. It's so alarming.
Well, the only way that the Democrats can win is to steal the election.
That's right.
They're down to that. They have no platform. They have no candidate. They have no campaign. They have Kamala Harris can't get 20 people to show up at a rally that they don't pay them or bust them in. Right. The entire thing is staged. And, the intelligence agencies have been running a Truman Show since 1963. I wrote a book earlier this year, The Kennedy Assassination. The JFK assassination of John F. Kennedy, final analysis. I worked with David Mantik, the radiation oncologist. He studied the X-rays. There's 3 skull X-rays from JFK's autopsy in the National Archives. Dr. Mantik did optical density measurements, which is a scientific instrument that measures the light coming through the X-rays. He proved forensically that all 3 of the X-rays are forged to mask frontal shots. And there's 2 clear frontal shots you can see coming in the X-rays. Dr. Kennedy was shot twice from the front. And the evidence is unmistakable from the X-rays. Right. And again, so 61 years, we've been told Lee Harvey Oswald is the sole lone gun assassin. And,
that's right.
Why does Building 7 come down to 9/11 when it was not hit by an airplane?
Exactly. Exactly.
Where were the weapons of mass destruction in 1991 when we invaded Iraq to get rid of Saddam Hussein? Colin Powell told the United Nations and everybody else that there were weapons of mass destruction. We didn't find any.
Right.
Why do you have a bad flu that becomes a pandemic and a lockdown and a vaccine that doesn't cure you of anything? In fact, it doesn't stop you from getting the disease. The vaccine might kill you. Right. It doesn't stop you from getting the disease. Fauci's had the disease multiple times.
Right.
So, the lies that we're being told and the manipulation by the media of a narrative to keep us in these perpetual wars, these perpetual economic downturns where we're made to be poorer, a country invaded by foreigners who will not adapt to our culture or our way of life and are not vetted. A CIA that is operating the drug trade. TD Bank just got fined $3 billion. I found HSBC money laundering for the Mexican drug cartels. They paid a $1 billion fine for criminal activity and admitted to it in 2011. You can't run open borders in fentanyl without a bank. You can't, drive a semi-trailer full of $100 bills to go to a taco stand and buy your lunch.
Right.
Got to get the money into a bank.
Right.
And when they do, the CIA's right there providing the bank and providing the services. CIA has been in the drug business since the OSS, before World War II. So, with the lies we've seen and the corruption we've seen and this neo-Marxist agenda, which I think is really satanic.
Yes.
There's no values, if somebody thinks that their gender is different from their sex, we have to celebrate whatever bizarre sexual activity they want to exhibit in public.
Exactly.
It's completely out of control.
Yes.
And this election, now that we found algorithms and we see what I believe is the intelligence agencies inside of our elections, we know we've got a serious problem here that has to be resolved. And if we don't do that, I fear that if we get a Kamala Harris presidency, we will be headed right towards nuclear war. I think that the Biden administration was headed there until very recently, when they decided that they would, that they couldn't run Biden, that their numbers weren't what they thought they would be, and the lies weren't working any longer. The war in Ukraine will go as long as the money keeps going. And I think the money stolen by the Bidens with Burisma and the corruption. I mean, we've just seen nothing about the United States today is the place where we grew up,
right?
The place where we valued our freedoms. This is being architected into a transhuman future that only monsters would want to live in.
Right. Right. And it's absolutely apparent that they don't give, they don't care. And we'll just roll in, like you said, we'll just roll in the tech, because they're going to do your jobs anyway for you. We don't need you. And we're just going to tell you, and it's horrifying to go forward from that. And, I even remember that even with the stuff starting in the 60s, still being born in the 70s and going in the 80s. I mean, we weren't so full blown. I mean, I know this stuff was happening, but I still remember a country that my father was proud to say that he fought for. He was in the Navy, forever retired Navy, and he doesn't even recognize us, to the point of tears. He's like, oh my gosh, what is happening to the world I spent my whole life fighting for, right? And others as well. And it's just, decade by decade, it gets like more, I almost call it on steroids now, but it just gets a little bit more open and a little bit more open. And I said this the other, actually it was last night, we're talking about COVID. As a disaster as that was, what an eye-opener for everyone to see, and the exposure coming forward, as we saw the elections, we see the education, we see the vaccines, we see the medical, we see what all this kind of stuff. And what do we do about it? That's really important, is that we are aware and we're doing these kind of things, especially like what you're talking about. I mean, paying attention to our own counties, challenging the situation before it comes certified. I mean, because I agree with you about this being an evil agenda moving forward. And I do not want to walk into that world. That's so alarming to me.
Well, these people, if you read Noah Harari or the World Economic Forum, they do not value human beings. They're postmodern. They say, we cut into a human being, you see the bones and the heart and the blood, but you don't see human rights. That's just a narrative. That's just a story. That's a fiction. And so therefore there aren't any human rights.
That's right.
And if they kill human beings, or their agenda is depopulation, there's too many human beings. We don't need them all. They're using up the resources of the world. And, the elite, self-appointed elite, want to run the world with their machines and their multinational corporations. And so therefore you get, a few billionaires, and the rest of us are serfs and slaves. That's right. The ones that are permitted to exist because we serve some purpose for these masters.
That's right.
And, this is, again, a very dystopian world, and the technology gives them the power to control it. And the technology can monitor everybody. They can have digital currency, and then if you don't have good social credit score, you don't have any money, you don't have any,
Right.
you can't use your cell phone, you don't have any way to communicate, you're cut off.
That's right.
And this is, again, a fundamental threat to our freedoms. And there's, I think, never been a more important election than the one we're in right now.
Oh, isn't that the truth?
And if we lose this one, if it's stolen this time, I think that the consequences are disastrous
Right.
for the human race globally. And
Right.
these demons, I do mean satanic demons, because I do think they're possessed. And I think that we're dealing with a spiritual war here.
Yes.
Where, we've lost our way, we've abandoned God. We're trying to put these transhuman, quantum computers and AI on the throne of God. We can rule everything. We don't. It's like the Garden of Eden. You believe Satan's lies. Satan will tell you he can make everything perfect. Just follow him.
Very true.
And so, therefore, it's the horrors and the evil are immeasurable.
That's right.
The lying and the brainwashing techniques, the fact that so many kids in the schools are taught this, that Israel gets attacked on October 7th, and we have the schools celebrating Hamas, which are the murderers.
Right. Right. And that's so ironic too, because if you want to be a trans person or even gay at that, and you went and lived there, they would slaughter you. It's absolutely illegal to be gay in that country and in that religion, but yet you want to protest and support those people. I mean, it's so confusing. This is why I have school, everyone. I mean, because what are we teaching our youth out there? And this is, our government schools continuing to promote this indoctrination and mixing it up to the point where you're rooting for the bad guys.
You're rooting for Satan. You're working on Satan's team.
That's right.
And that's not a winning formula. I mean,
no.
We're not going to perfect this place. We're all going to die. It is not meant to be permanent. And there's nothing you can take here with you except for the experience. And so therefore all your riches and everything else that mean nothing, the final analysis. And yet we have people breaking marriages, people, very few children, fewer and fewer children are getting raised by a mother and a father in a home.
Exactly.
We're having, grandparents are put in homes. They're not made into multi-generational families.
Right.
We are, we're not living a life that is the way human beings were meant to live.
Right.
Which is, family structures are very important. National structures are very important. Cities and states are important. People live locally. And when we go to this, this transnational corporations and transhumanism, all we're going to get is food that is poisonous and lies about climate change. So we stop using hydrocarbon fuels and kill people. Wars in which we hate the current enemy of the state, whomever that is, by Big Brother, determined. And we dumb down the population so nobody can think.
Exactly.
And then we rig the elections because we don't need voters. Klaus Schwab is already on the record as saying we don't need voters.
No, you're absolutely right on that. And he doesn't. They're terrified of the population. This is why they want population control, because they don't want them to be challenged. They don't want it, to have an uprising. And if they can just kill us off in every way, in every form they can, they don't have to worry about the challenge. It's more controllable if you have a smaller population. And like you said, they are completely going on with their agendas. They meet every single year. And even more than that, they have the big forum at least every single year. But they were just in New York with the UN and WHO, talking about more agendas, with WHO taking over our healthcare, right? For the next pandemic. I mean, it's just absolutely frightening. And it's so important for us to understand exactly what's happening and to be a part of this change. I've encouraged all of my viewers too, that you don't have to put evil and nasty pictures out there, but even the hashtags, I'm aware, we got to stop this, right? Whatever your hashtag might be, save the children, or, the evil WF, whatever we are doing to make them aware that we are not taking this anymore, because that is their agenda and they don't care about voting.
They don't care about voting. They don't care about people. They don't care what we think.
Right.
They know better. I mean, if the power of these algorithms, I'm a political scientist. I have a PhD from Harvard in political science. I've been dealing with voting data since the 1960s. If you take this type of algorithm and you could run a simulation of the election, and if you didn't like the voting, you could make your simulation the official vote. And I doubt if people would know the difference, because you can run a simulation that's as good as an election. And with the capabilities we have today of quantum computing and AI, you're going to be very able to model elections and say, we can tell what the people are thinking. We don't need to run an election, but you would make the election look legitimate. But the candidates that would win would be the candidates you picked to win.
Right.
And the people would be told that this was fair.
Right.
Well, it's like a communist election.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody votes, but Putin gets 99% of the vote.
Right.
And
I was just thinking about Cuba. I've spent several months there, and the same thing, right? Their president is installed, but everybody gets to vote.
It just doesn't mean anything.
Right.
It's a worthless activity. But if you don't do it, you can suffer criminal penalties, because they want the show of everybody voting.
That's right.
And they want to claim that they're democracy. I mean, that's the hypocrisy, that the perversion of language that goes along with this mind-bending ideology. This is really human beings have fundamental values. There's good ideas and bad ideas. There's things that work and things that don't work. And natural law, the 10 Commandments, these are things that work. And we have to teach people things as simple as the 10 Commandments indicates, what a fallen species we really are.
Right.
You have to tell people, don't steal, don't kill people,
right?
Believe in God. Well, you wouldn't think you'd have to tell people this.
And here we are. I mean, look at the cities where they're just ransacking stores and wherever to just take whatever they want to, killing people left and right. They have no idea that this is actually something immorally. It's like they have no morals. They don't understand that is wrong.
And they don't understand either that it doesn't work, because the stores close up. And so you get, a city like San Francisco where the businesses close up, then the restaurants close up. And so you get to be a ghost city from one of the most beautiful cities in the country. Union Square, which used to have top shopping, the stores all closed. Nordstrom's closes. And the hotels downtown are empty. The buildings are empty. And people are not going to go downtown when it's filled with drug paraphernalia, people stealing on the streets, feces all over the place, and homeless sleeping in the downtown areas. I mean, it's disgusting.
It is.
And if we're going to live this way, we've taken the United States and we're making it into a third world country. And it starts with, the voter integrity. The God's Five Stones is so important right now. I encourage people to come and read this and study it and read the papers on it, because you're going to see there the hypocrisy of people who think they can get away with stealing elections, and I think are willing to do it almost out in the open, because they don't think anybody's going to do anything about it. And certainly our Justice Department's not going to do anything about it. I think it's going to be we the people that stop it. And I think we stop it with county supervisors that say no. I think we stop it with demanding before an election is certified that it be questioned, that we have recounts of, not just recounts, but we have forensic examination of the mail-in ballots. We have forensic examination of these machines to make sure that the vote you cast that you wanted voted is the vote that they register voted.
Right.
There's so many different ways to lie that we're constantly dealing with those in power being the liars.
Right.
And if that's the case, then the goal is for the rest of us to be compliant and walk into our own imprisonment without objection.
Right.
And ultimately into our own execution without objection, because that's the next step. If we can be controlled this way, we can be executed.
Right. I mean, how many people even look at their own ballots after you voted? That you can do that, right? To even see if who you voted for was actually the person that was checked. I mean, that's a very beginning start. Is, get your family and friends, check your own ballots. You can do that. Like, I believe it's almost right afterwards. Within a matter of hours, you can be checking your own ballots to even see that. I had my father, when my mom passed away, said, Dad, did mom vote? And he went and looked, and had to, check that kind of stuff out. But that's a great way, and start with those board of supervisors, and make sure, if they are not willing, and I hate to say this because, elections coming up, and I don't know when the elections are for your board of supervisors, but this is why I've been screaming about your county elected officials, because if they are not standing up for what is right and what is constitutionally correct, they need to be replaced. And maybe by you guys. I mean, get up and go run for it. I mean, but these are elected officials, and their job is to do exactly what you're talking about here.
Our job is to make sure things are done correctly.
Right.
The job is to make sure that we don't get this neo-Marxism into our culture, into our kids' heads.
Right.
We're raising a generation of children who don't know fundamental skills. They're not taught to read. They're not taught mathematics. They're not taught history or literature. They're certainly not taught religion.
Right.
They're taught this Marxism, which is, glorification of the state and glorification of lying and power and cheating. They're taught hatred, all this, racism and race baiting. When in 2008, I wrote Abomination, which is the book against Barack Obama. I exposed that he was raised as a Muslim. He was raised as a communist. And I pointed out that, Barack Obama hated the United States. He was trained and raised to hate the United States. When he said we want a fundamental change, the fundamental change was to destroy our traditional values. It was to make us go into a communist country and to fit into this globalism. Well, again, these are the root of the evil, which starts with our necessity to confront and to say that this evil is wrong.
Right.
And to demand in our own families and our own children that we not educate them this way. Like you're homeschooling and doing, all of this on a national basis is needed.
Right.
Because you can't responsibly send your child off to a school where they're going to get indoctrinated as a communist, taught to hate the United States, and question what their own sex is, calling it gender. Your gender is different from your sex. Well, that's a schizophrenic idea right there.
Right. And we're not going to teach them how to read, because if they know how to read, then they can actually research for themselves. This is why they have the reading. And it's not because of COVID, guys. I mean, children's levels of readings have been behind for decades. And that's the number one thing I work on with my school, too, is getting these kids to be able to read. Because if you cannot read and critically think for yourself, how are you going to research this? You're always left to believe what somebody else is saying is true, because you can't read, you can't research, you don't know, right? You're just going to go with the flow. And you wonder why people end up voting for situations like this. It's because they don't have the ability to know how to critically think and read. It's so important.
They see a celebrity or they see a video on TikTok.
Exactly.
And they're persuaded
that must be gold, right?
This is really cool. And so they're going to follow this and believe this. And, the fact is they don't realize that they're being led right into slavery this way.
That's right.
And, the necessity to be able to critically think, to read, has to be taught to a child. And if you don't have parents that are resolved to stay together and to have a long-lasting relationship, have children, have sex to procreate children, and then to raise them in a moral education.
Right.
Well, this is what requires discipline. And without a moral understanding of our life here, of our fundamental condition on earth, that this is not a permanent place, that becoming a top basketball star or a rock celebrity isn't going to get you happiness, isn't going to get you salvation. These kids are not even being taught the concept of spirituality, the soul, or the life after death.
Right. They're not even being taught faith. And people kind of a few people have questioned me on that too, because they're like, oh, do you teach religion in school? I go, no, but I teach about faith, because if you don't even have faith in yourself to even accomplish a goal, how are you going to grow up and have faith in your future? And that is very much a spiritual aspect. Don't get me wrong, but they don't even know what faith is, not even to believe in themselves. So it's vitally important in this. So as we are finishing up here, please give people some advice on what is important for them to do in their counties and communities, because we have an election here in 2 weeks, everybody, and there is no time like right now to be focused on this. Before, like we said, this is one of the biggest, if not the biggest election that we've ever faced. I know, at least in my lifetime. If I would have gone back, I may have thought about that with the Obama election, not knowing, right? But here we are, everyone, and we are going to continue on this trajectory of evil if we do not do stuff in our communities. So, Dr. Corsi, what would you give people? Give them missions. What do we need to do?
Well, go to God's Five Stones, gods5stones.com, get educated about this. Read a little bit, spend some time there, and understand what the algorithms are and how they're in the election database and can be used to cheat the mail-in ballots.
Okay.
Get involved with the election. You can become a poll watcher. You can talk to your county supervisors and tell them that as a citizen, you want them to challenge the election. You don't want them to rubber stamp the election. Let them know you care. Call your Secretary of State and say, we've got an algorithm in our state. I want to get it out of here. And say, I'm not going to reelect you. If you can't handle this responsibility, we're going to find somebody else to do your job.
Right.
And to get politically active, to realize the importance of the school boards and the city council, because life is lived locally and you need to get involved locally and not to let these people who are political activists with their political correct ideas run it. It's got to have the courage to be politically incorrect.
Right.
And to say, you guys are the racists. I mean, and when I wrote Abomination, I said we've become more of a racially divided country. We would become economically weakened, and our military strength would be diminished. And that's all happened. That's been the agenda. Fundamental transformation of America has been to reduce our significance and our power and our standard of living, rather than to raise the rest of the world up to that standard, which we can do. But again, not without the fundamental morals that we had to build this country in the first place. Right. And if we lose those morals, we lose the country. And if you can't tell the difference between lying and the truth, between an election that is stolen and one that is not stolen, you've got to learn how to see the apparent difference and to point it out. To have the courage of your convictions to say, I'm not going to do this anymore. Mm-hmm. And we're going to call it out. So again, people have got to not be complacent and not put up with this. I'm talking not about revolution. I'm talking about refusal to participate. You stop buying Budweiser beer because it does does a woke commercial, the transgender. Budweiser is going to change pretty quickly. Yeah, you start following investments and see this stock or this mutual fund is DEI, and they're reducing your returns. Get out of it. That's right. It's not the actions you take with the things you buy, the things you belong to, the groups you associate with. We can, by withdrawing our support from all these groups, we can seriously diminish they'll collapse. Withdraw kids from the schools, public schools will collapse. That's right. And it'd be okay with me if they did collapse. That's because they're not teaching anything right now except for neo-Marxism, transgenderism, Satanism, and all the, you have to say, well, if Satan's a religion, why can't we have him being, can't we have his statue in the, in the city hall? Right. Well, Satan is not a religion, it's anti-religion. And if you don't know the difference, it shows that you need to read the Bible. You need to start from the fundamentals. And if you don't, you're going to end up in the streets. You're going to end up in drugs. You're going to end up in a way you don't want to end up because, again, life is not made to be successful without the fundamental principles that through the ages have been learned by generations of people that work. And if you want to follow the ideas that don't work, the lying, stealing, cheating, and drugs and sex and all the rest of the stuff that is sold today, you're going to be following down a path of perdition, and it's not going to be a pretty outcome.
That's right. That is absolutely right. It has been such an honor to have you here, Dr. Corsi. It really has. You guys, I have his website up here. I encourage you to go mark this. And when you have time, please go and view this website, read all these different things that they're bringing to you. And you guys know me. I've been talking about getting involved in our communities like crazy. My board of supervisors have a meeting every third Tuesday, and we went and we've talked about that going, okay, if this happens, what are you prepared to do? And just even asking them questions. I mean, I send an email. I mean, I know we're kind of getting close on the wire, but time was before to get active in our community. We need to get it active right now and continue. I love that because the power of our money is huge, and it can shift in how we vote or how we put our money in it, or like we Bud Light things, right? Because if it's like, I'm sorry, if you don't agree with that, get out, put your money somewhere else. Your purchases. And I'm with you on the whole school thing. That's why like I said, I started my own, because I was like, oh no, this is horrible. And when I was in the system, in the government school, I mean, seeing the kids, I mean, it floored me that we are sending them off and they couldn't even read and do math at all. And these are 11th and 12th graders. And they're just so crazy with this, whatever's the fad, that they can't even think critically. So I'm with you on that. But this is the moment, everybody, and we need to get active if we want to be in a republic and save our country. And I always say this: if you're going to be a republic, that means of the people, by the people, for the people. That means that we need to be active, right? And so I can encourage you to do that. And Dr. Corsi, you are welcome back anytime you want to. I didn't know you had so many books, and if you want to come and talk about another one at a different time, please reach out, because I'll give you the show. I'll let you just
thank you very much.
To school. That
we'll do
is
it.
Awesome.
Well, I'll be back.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time tonight. I sure do appreciate you and all that you are doing. Keep up the fight, and thank you for your efforts and everybody that is working with you to do so. We really appreciate that.
God bless. Thank you very much.
God bless you. Have a great night.
Thank you.